David, how are you this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Ted. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. You and I had a quick chat. I had reached out to you about being a advisory board member for TLTF, and we had a great conversation. I was like, man, I got to get this guy on the podcast. So looking forward to it. In addition to your work on the board at TLTF, you're also a partner at Fenimore and chair of the Fennemore Labs, and fill in the blanks. Like, well, tell our audience a little bit about kind of who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Yeah, very good. So, yeah, my name is David McCarville. I'm chair of Fennemore Labs, which is our firm's R&D division, looking at AI programs and also looking at alternative platforms. Like, does an alternative business structure make sense? We're looking at new pricing structures. So, we have an AI and AFA policy document we produce for our partners to look at. We're also looking at how we can streamline operations. So, kind of the work you're doing at Infodash, how we can work with tech vendors to better serve our clients is really our main mission. And the committee is made up of attorneys who are practicing like myself. I'm in our business and finance practice group, but we have attorneys from all over our offices and our different practice groups, participating and trying to help us figure out how we can use this technology to better serve our clients. In addition to that, we created a number of ad hoc working groups that are looking at AI and alternative fee arrangements. And we meet pretty regularly with those groups, trying to help them understand, what are the tools that we can use, what are some use cases, and what are some good clients that we could potentially work with to use this technology. So that's a big part of what we do with labs. I'm also chair of our D&I committee on service and outreach, and I'm part of our Fenimore Forward program, which is a program where we have attorneys who have their own book of business come to work in places where we don't have traditional brick and mortar offices. So I'm located in Massachusetts near Boston. We have about 30 attorneys, I believe, now in the Fenimore Forward program who are all over the country. Most of our lawyers, so we have about 350 lawyers, and most of our Fenimore lawyers and offices are in the Mountain West. So that's our home base, if you will. We're headquartered in Phoenix, where we started in 1885. So firm has been around for a long time, and I'm real happy to be here. So thank you.
Awesome, good stuff. And you said R&D and law firm in the same sentence, which I thought was interesting. That's not, you don't hear about law firms doing much R&D, at least in the tech space. So how did Fenimore gravitate in that direction? Because again, you don't hear about it a lot.
Yeah, I think it was pretty organic. I mean, we are fortunate that we have a management committee that's really looking forward, looking to the future, and led by our CEO James Goodnow, who I believe is the youngest CEO of an AmLaw 200 firm. And I have sort of an interest and a curiosity in technology. I've been teaching a class at ASU Law School as an adjunct professor on blockchain and cryptocurrency. This is my 8th year of doing that, so it just was sort of a natural point of gravitation. I just moved towards technology. And then, of course, when ChatGPT dropped 3 years ago, we had started Fenimore Labs with the idea, hey, we really need to be leaning in and figuring out how we can use technology. And of course, the AI boom started right around then. So initially, in the first year, we spent a lot of time just trying to understand, what is this technology? Who's who in the zoo? We made a catalog of over 100 legal AI tech providers. We, did a bunch of demos with people. And then the second year, we really started to center on a few very good vendors that we continued to vet and work closely with. And now some of those vendors are on board with us, and happy to say that they're working out very well. But again, these vendors that are on board with us now, for the most part, we've been talking to them for about 2 years. And so it's been a bit of a slog and a slow burn, but it's been exciting also. And I give a lot of credit to the manager committee, but also to the other attorneys like myself who are willing to dedicate some time to helping us figure this out, because you really do have to have both, I think, a grassroots group of attorneys who are willing to put time in on it, and you have to have the management commitment as well. So we're fortunate to have both of those things.
Well, and that's a good segue into the topic around billable hours and alternative fee arrangements. And the reason it's a good segue is because it's so difficult when so much emphasis is placed on, billable hour targets to get attorneys to to divert their focus and their attention. There's a really high opportunity cost. There's a there's a couple of interesting threads out there on, I'm not going to say the name of the firm, but a firm recently published a 2,400 hour, maybe it was 2,000 hour billable, 400 hour kind of what we're talking about here, R&D development kind of hours. And, if you do the math on that, it's pretty outrageous how the level of the extent to which that will skew work-life balance. And, there's so much burnout in the industry. It's like, man, how do you guys think about balance and trying to make it a sustainable path where people just don't hate their lives as they as they make their way up the ranks? Like, I don't know, any secret sauce there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a culture at Fenimore. Like I said, we've been around for a long time, since 1885. And, before I came to Fenimore, I had the pleasure of working with some of the attorneys on different matters. And it's always had the culture of, we work hard and we have good attorneys, but we're not going to kill people with billable hour requirements. In some ways, it's kind of a choose your own adventure. Like, if you want to build 2,400 hours, we'll help you. And we're happy to do that. And it is a little bit about the money. But we enjoy a little more of a sort of Western Arizona approach to this kind of thing. We're not, a New York law firm and in the AmLaw 20 or whatever. So there's a different culture. I think I would credit that work-life balance does matter. We understand that lawyers can get burned out, and a burned out lawyer is no good for anybody. So we try to, basically straddle that line between working hard, but also having some balance. So I think that's an important part of culture that you just can't really transplant somewhere. But related to the alternative fee arrangements and how we look at the collections issue, is it really is mostly about collections at the end of the day anyway, right? Because you can build 2,000 hours. If you only collect half of those, then it's really not that great. So what we are enthusiastic about is using AI to reduce write-offs, especially for associates on matters, and getting a better first draft and making sure that we're being efficient with our time and that our clients are getting some value. It's been a struggle, and I'll get into it a little bit in terms of why that is. I anticipated that, hey, all we need to do is find the right vendor, and then it'll be easy to unlock an alternative fee arrangement. But it's actually more difficult than that, because, yeah, you have to find the right vendor, the right use case. You also have to find the right partner or director, in our firm, as we call them, who can then take that and champion it with the right client. And then you have to figure out how to account for all of this in our internal compensation system and crack that nut. So there are a number of challenges to get to a point where you're really ready and able to use alternative fee arrangements at scale. We have been working very hard on it for a few years. It's hard work. So I don't think anybody should look at this and think we're going to be able to figure this out in 6 months, because that's just not going to happen. It might take another 6 months from now. It might take another 6 years. But at this point, the efficiencies that we see are really not materializing, because we're spending a lot of time verifying that we're actually getting the right product to the client, right? So I think the efficiencies are going to be there. We're looking at 20 to 80% efficiency on some workflows. But for the most part, it's just making our work product better, and we're doing a better job of quality control using these AI tools that we have right now.
And how are you creating incentives for attorneys to embrace the tech tools and these alternative pricing models?
Well, it's interesting. I think the incentives over the last month have been me showing my colleagues how these tools that we have on board right now are working, and giving them some of the work product. And they are, reacting in a way that's telling me that they want these products, and they're going to go through the training now to get after it, because they can see what they're doing. So that's one incentive, is just showing them, here's what, this tool can do on your particular area of practice. And if I'm able to use it and show them results without being an expert in their domain, that's convincing to them. So I'm seeing that happen in real time. The other aspect of it is working again with our management committee and our financial folks to make sure that we understand how we can deal with an alternative fee arrangement. And that's why we developed a policy document that tries to identify the various categories of AFAs between hybrid agreements, pure retainers. There's a whole universe of AFAs that are out there, and trying to find the right one for the director and also for their client is a big part of it. And, that relationship is so important, right? So you don't want to put somebody in a position where they're trying an AI tool and an alternative fee arrangement with a client, and then they end up getting burned, right? That's just not appropriate. So it has to be dealt with very carefully. And, you have to do a fair amount of work to put in place the infrastructure on the compensation side, and also to educate and bring your partners along. Hey, this is really kind of where this is going. So the earlier we engage on it, the better off we are all going to be.
So, and then how do you mitigate risks more broadly? Like if a client, if you head down the AFA path with an important client relationship, I mean, there's all sorts of risks. It's not just financial risks to the firm. It's, potentially quality of deliverables to the client, or how do you guys think about and manage risks more broadly when you're deploying AFAs with these important client relationships?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that requires a conversation between, the attorney who has a relationship and the client, that, hey, we have these tools. We think these tools can solve these problems for you. Um, let's do a proof of concept, right? So I think this is probably the easiest way to mitigate the risk, is just being honest with your client, having a real discussion that, hey, we're going to try this. We think this can work. What is interesting about it is, what we're seeing is that there are things that we can do for clients that would be very helpful to them that they previously would not have come to us for because we were too expensive by the hour. But they may be upstream or downstream from our normal legal services, but they're very relevant and related to our normal legal services. So, things that perhaps a client would have been doing internally, but maybe not doing so well, we now can offer them some services using these AI tools. So a big part of it is really just having an open conversation with the client about, their business, their workflows, and how our workflow as their attorney interacts with that workflow, and seeing if there are some additional value add, services that we can provide using these tools to them around that. So mitigating the risk is really just trying to understand what your client's needs are, and having a little bit more of an objective view, rather than just a narrow view of, these are legal services we provide you and this is all we're going to look at. Let's try to look at a more holistic, view of the workflow before we get the product, and afterwards. How do we actually mitigate risk for your business using the tools that we have in our legal services?
So I looked up some stats. It's been a while, so I might get this wrong. So nobody hold me to these numbers, but I looked up some stats a few months ago about law firm leadership demographics. And if I remember correctly, it was a very high percentage of the executive committee demographics skewed older, like 55 plus, which is no surprise, right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
usually your more senior leaders in the organization, um, uh, which is interesting because the most McKinsey did a study um, based on age cohorts on the the age brackets that were most comfortable with Gen AI, and the most comfortable are millennials, right? So it's hard to
Hmm.
believe, but millennials are, I mean, that generation started, I don't know, early 80s, I think it was, maybe 82.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's almost, they're 43 now, which is crazy. Like they're in their mid 40s. But that slice of, that cohort is most comfortable with Gen AI. And when you're talking about pushing out a very disruptive technology, you really have to set tone at the top, right? And those at the top
Hmm.
are going to be, they are least comfortable with Gen AI as a group, right? So there's plenty of exceptions to that, and maybe your leadership team is different, but as a group, so how do you guys, how do we do that? How do we do both things, right? Like it's important for leaders to understand the transformative nature of the technology and be comfortable with it to really push it down to the masses. But those, law firm leadership skews much older than more broadly. Overall, if you look across industries, it you know it's seniority based, right? So leaders have been with the organization longer; they tend to be older, but it skews higher in legal. So how do you guys think about setting the tone at the top when sometimes the people at the top are the least comfortable with the tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely a management committee issue, right? And I think our management committee has addressed it by being very intentional with regard to the directors' meetings that we have every month, making sure to educate the directors about AI and where it's going and what it's doing. We've had some really interesting directors' meetings along those lines, and then having breakout sessions where people can talk about it, but also during the annual retreat. We just had our annual retreat at the end of May in San Diego, and it was mostly about AI and the speakers we invited. We had Richard Susskind come the year before in our retreat in Nevada, which was great listening to him talk about his book, Tomorrow's Lawyers. And it's that kind of intentional messaging from the management committee that they think has really broken through with that older demographic. And you're right. I mean, look, from their perspective, they are, for the most part, making a very good living doing things the way that they've been doing them for a long time. And their horizon is a little shorter than the rest of us in terms of where they are for retirement. So it's not as big of an incentive for them to move into exploring something new. But yeah, I mean, we had a very good business and finance practice group meeting today, and a number of the folks who were, asking questions of the AI vendor that was demonstrating, the product were interested, and they were older, and they were interested, and they can see the value in it and really, I think that's where the proof is in the pudding, right? When you can show a lawyer, hey, this is going to get you to a 90% draft much faster, and it's going to improve your work product, whatever age they're at, if they can see it with their own eyes, it's going to be convincing. And that's what we're finally starting to see now. It's really starting to break through. So the proof is in the pudding, I guess. And these lawyers who've been around for a long time, they'll know when they see an AI product that's actually working versus one that's just, you know, flashbang and noise, nothing really happening. But the ones that we're demonstrating right now are really getting some traction with these folks, and they're interested and they're willing to take the training that we require to use them. So that tells you a lot right there.
Yeah. You mentioned like 20 to 80% efficiency gains on specific legal tasks, which is incredible. But can you give some examples? Like what sort of tasks? Are there any common themes across those tasks?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at litigation, a lot of the different components of litigation, you can break them down. Like if we look at different AI tools that can take and create a chronology of events and facts and fact patterns, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And there's still going to need to be a lot of work in terms of oversight on how you put those things together. But it can be done a lot more efficiently using a very good and vetted AI program. The same thing is true with contracts and transactional work that I do, and with our M&A group, especially on due diligence. There's a lot of things that AI can really do very quickly to help surface issues that are very important, like, hey, where are the liquidated damages clauses here in these contracts? And also helping you generate language that is going to work for a very specific situation. I mean, the reality is for most lawyers, in our AmLaw 200 ranks here, the work that we do is very custom. I mean, I know it's probably not as custom as we like to think it is, but all of us think of our own language as being very, very important. And so, what's important for us is to understand where we can get those efficiencies and how we can use AI to put our own spin on it and customize it for the work that we do for our clients using our best templates and our best phrases and clauses that we've created over the years. And that's, one of the exciting things we're starting to see now is that we can start to create those kinds of customizations for lawyers. And that's very exciting because that's really, I think, one of the things that's kept a lot of people from being engaged because, they have their own specific languages and processes they like to use. And so giving them tools now that can help them implement that is really an exciting part of the growth that we're seeing.
And then last time you and I talked, you had mentioned that you guys were thinking about like playbooks for standardized work or like stock purchase agreements and NDAs. I never sent NDAs to lawyers anyway, but I run them through my GPT or one of the models now, and I have our standard MNDA and ask for what's different, and it works. It works great. It's low risk, but stock purchase agreement, lease reviews. My wife and I own 5 gyms here in St. Louis, and we moved one, so we've had to sign 6 commercial leases. And we avoided lawyers until the last minute. Like, so it'd be me and my broker hashing out, because I think I'm certified by the jailhouse bar, right? I could be a jailhouse lawyer. I've read enough legal documents, so we would get it to maybe inside the 20-yard line, and then bring a lawyer in to kind of finalize it. But it seems like there's tremendous opportunity. Like, what are your thoughts on like creating playbooks around some of that standardized work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think playbooks are going to be great, especially for quality control. And I think, this is probably not something that's talked about very much, but I think playbooks are going to be very helpful for young attorneys and associates, because the playbooks we're creating are from experienced attorneys' templates, and they're the ones who are creating the playbooks, right? We don't have associates creating playbooks. But when the playbook is run, the program can show the attorney, like, okay, here's why we're changing this provision, right? It gives the rationale and the language. And I don't know about other attorneys who are out there, but for me as an associate coming up, I had some good mentors for sure on how to do things, how to not do things. You pay attention and you learn those things, but having somebody sit down and walk through a contract with you like that, clause by clause, and show you this is why we're redlining it, didn't really happen. And now I think it's possible for a young associate to get that kind of training and education, if they're paying attention, and which they are. I mean, all the associates we bring on are great attorneys. Are going to be great attorneys. They need some experience, right? And so having the tools in the playbook to help educate and train attorneys in real time when they're creating that first draft for the director to look at, I think it's a valuable resource, and I think it's something that's going to help them in their career. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think the playbooks are going to be very important. And again, playbooks that are customized based on the specific needs of the attorney who has that client relationship. And I'm sure, attorneys out there will recognize that you can have 10 attorneys all in the same practice group working on the same type of document, but they're going to want to draft it a little bit differently, right? Because everybody has their own language. And to some extent, attorneys are more like artists than they are, engineers, right? So, they might all get to the same place at the end of the day, but they're going to want to get there perhaps using some different language. And so we have to be able to give them the tools that allow them to customize it the way that they want and the way their client expects it as well.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? So, today legal is very bespoke, right? It's Etsy, not Amazon. And,
Mm.
the reality is, as we build these tech-enabled legal service delivery machines, how much opportunity and really how much appetite is there in the marketplace for more of that bespoke, hey, I really like this language, versus the standard out of the playbook? Like, that's something that I've always struggled with, because I've worked with a lot of lawyers. I've been an entrepreneur for 32 years and had lots of lawyers with differing philosophies about things. And I've gotten advice to do it one way, and then taken that document, change law firms, and hand it to another one. They're like, yeah, absolutely not. Yeah. How much opportunity for standardization is there in legal, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the lawyerly answer is it depends, right? And I think it depends on the market segment you're talking about. So for the most part, the AmLaw 200 is serving a very narrow section of the general population, right? And for most of the clients that we have, they trust us individually and as a firm to take care of them, and they're willing to spend their resource, their money, to have us spend our time getting it right. And so I think to some extent that market's always going to be there for customized bespoke legal work. But as we know, there is a humongous market of small and medium-sized businesses out there that typically won't come to a Fenimore or another AmLaw 200 firm for legal services. And for those clients, there probably is going to be a market open up for them of more standardized agreements and legal services at scale that's different than what LegalZoom offers right now, and is different than what Fenimore offers our current clients. But there's, I think, a huge latent legal market in between those two, brackets. And I think this technology is going to unlock it. And, we're certainly paying attention to that as well.
Yeah, I've been kind of running an experiment over the last probably since close to the beginning of the year, where I have been running almost everything. I can't even think of any exceptions to this right now. Every piece of legal work product that crosses my desk, I run through AI now, and for a variety of different reasons. Some of it is pure testing, like I've mentioned it on the podcast before. We hired a employee away from from a competitor, and they had some non-compete language, and we wanted to make sure that we steered clear of encroaching on that. So we engaged a labor and employment attorney. We asked him a big, long set of questions. I wrote down the answers, and then I went to AI and I asked all the same questions. And you know what? The answers were almost identical, with very few
Hmm.
exceptions. We have a 409A program here that's, like a shadow equity incentive program. I ran that through AI. It did a fantastic job risk ranking all my risks. We were redoing our operating agreement. We just converted, or we took a C Corp election that had to be reflected in the operating agreement. I had it go through and highlight risks. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And it did better in most cases than any lawyer has ever done, explaining to me, well, first of all, risk ranking, inventorying the risks, risk ranking them based on impact, and then also kind of like a likelihood of occurrence, and then
Hmm.
helping role play where specific provisions might manifest themselves and what the economic impact of that would be. So it's not that a lawyer isn't capable of doing that. They are, but to put it in that nice, neat, orderly, you'd end up paying $30,000 just for all the admin work necessary to do that. And I got it done in 30 seconds using Grok 4. So
Hmm.
I have been absolutely shocked at how good AI is at doing so many legal tasks. Now, for high risk stuff, like my attorneys always like do the docs always uh, get finalized by my legal team. But man, it has been an eye opener just seeing how good AI is at this stuff. Do you have the same perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and it's getting better all the time. I mean, that's the thing that's really surprising to me, especially with the vendors we're working with, where they're continuing to add new features. And it's phenomenal. And I think there are threats to the traditional legal business model in a number of ways. One is just the technology itself, like you're pointing out. More and more people can just go and use the technology, and they might be satisfied with that. Now, obviously, there's some danger to that, and you're smart to go back to your attorneys and have them review the final. But um, the technology is definitely a threat. And then, of course, our current competitors who are learning how to use AI as well, that's a real threat. And then you have, for example, I think it was this summer, Y Combinator made a call for founders to come in and start a full stack AI law firm. So, we have new entrants coming into the market that aren't our traditional competitors that are going to be using this technology in different ways. You have the alternative business structure, licenses, and other things that can potentially combine legal services and technology in ways that hasn't been done before. So the traditional legal model is definitely under a lot of pressure. There are a lot of threats from different areas. So it's very important for us to be aware of that. I'm hopeful because I just think that there are going to be increasing demands from our existing clients for legal services. I see opportunities for us to provide additional services to our clients that are, related to the traditional services we provide them. And I think we can get after additional client bases that, before now may not have come to us either down market or up market, because we can use these tools effectively and because we're putting in the time in a disciplined way to understand how to use this technology. So I'm bullish, but at the same time, hearing you talk about your use of AI, I know there are a lot of clients that are doing the same thing, and they're sending us, product that they've already run through their AI tools, and so it is just part of the fabric now, I think, of providing legal services that you need to understand that this is a movement that's happening where the technology is going to be a threat to your business if you're not embracing it already.
And you guys are headquartered in a state that's pioneering kind of the modified model rule 5.4 with allowing non-legal ownership in the form of alternative business structures. And there are entrants making their way into that market. There is about a 4,000 employee tax and advisory firm called Aprio that I don't know if they have, I think they have a joint venture with a small 50 attorney law firm called Radix Law, and they created Aprio Law. That was newsworthy, but KPMG also was granted rights to stand up an ABS, which I think is extremely interesting given their size and scale. 36,000 employees, $40+ billion in, no, I'm sorry, 36. They have like 275,000 employees, 40 billion in revenue. And that's probably a dated number. They're probably higher now. A global presence, DNA that is really adopted the innovation ethos, and 4,000 lawyers. If you stood those lawyers out on their own, they'd probably be an AmLaw 10 law firm. And I look at that and I'm like, man, these guys are going to be competing with some of these law firms that have really underinvested in technology, are resistant to change, are risk avoidant, have consensus driven decision making governance models, and XCOM members with short retirement horizons that are in lateral mobility, firm to firm. Like, all of this adds up to what's going to happen. Like, how do you see this thing playing out as more, and that still, I mean, and I just want to be clear, like, I'm not saying law firms are going away. I don't think that at all. The bet the farm stuff is still going to law firms for the foreseeable future, maybe forever. But there's a lot of blocking and tackling work out there too that I could see KPMG making a really strong pitch for. So I don't know. How do you see the whole ABS thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's exciting. And, I'm happy to say that our firm was one of, I think, the few, if not the only larger firm in Phoenix that didn't sign a petition to try to stop the Arizona State Supreme Court from putting the ABS in place. And we actually had one of the judiciary come in and talk to us about, why it was stood up. And the whole reason for it to be stood up in the first place was really an access to justice issue. It wasn't necessarily for KPMG to make more money. It was to give, regular citizens more access to legal services, with the idea that technology would enable legal services to be delivered at a lower price point, which I think is correct. And I do think that's probably going to be the net effect and net impact of ABS entities, is that they are going to be able to use technology and different business model structures rather than the partnership structure and billable hours to generate revenue in a way that is going to make the legal services much less expensive to receive. And I'm also bullish that the demand for legal services is going to continue to increase, because I do think that there are a lot of people out there who have unmet legal needs. I think even our existing clients, for the most part, have things that they would probably prefer that we do for them, but that we've just been too expensive to do them for them in the past. And now, with this technology and with us having a real honest conversation with them, I think we can expand a little bit our footprint and maybe change some of the pricing into alternative fee arrangements. I do think AFAs will take off. I just don't know when. I think there's a tremendous amount of hype and pressure around putting them forward for good reason. But the broad scale implementation of AFAs and departure from billable hours, I don't know that it ever fully happened, because in some instances, the client's getting a great deal. If they can pay by the hour for advice that will literally save them millions of dollars, which happens pretty regularly, then they're going to do that, right? But there are workflows and specific legal services, I think, that are good fits for AFAs. And so it might be, 6 months from now, it could be 6 years, who knows? But we as lawyers have to be thinking this way, because there are a lot of problems for us to solve just to get into a position to provide clients with legal services that are not based on a billable hour. So fair amount of work that we have to do to change our mindset and our internal compensation structures to get ready for that.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty short-sighted for law firms and lawyers to oppose this ABS model rolling out. I actually believe that lawyers are going to be the ones advocating for it soon. And the reason is because there are a number of benefits that it creates. First, it creates a whole new access to capital that didn't exist before, which really wasn't necessary. Scaling a professional services team, you need some money for working capital, right? There's a pretty big delay from, an hour that you work on January 1st that doesn't get invoiced until February 15th, that doesn't get collected until March 15th, if you're lucky. And you may only collect half that. So there's capital needs there, right? But in terms of doing R&D, which I think law firms are going to have to do, because I don't think that buying off-the-shelf tools is going to create enough differentiation, because again, competitors can do it. So how are firms going to differentiate themselves? They've historically done that with their brand, with the wins, the high profile wins, with the big name attorneys that they've got that have had the high profile cases. And that's still going to be a factor, but technology is also going to be a factor. And that has not been a factor before. And how are they going to deploy on that without capital? Well, this opens up a whole new avenue. So I don't know and I think over time that lawyers are going to realize that they're going to have to, the rules of the game have changed. And if they want to compete, they're going to have to make investments. And how do they fund those investments? Well, ABS is a good model. Do you think that mindset, that anti-ABS mindset is too well entrenched to move, or could you see it moving?
Yeah, I mean, you see some state legislatures introducing legislation to try to block. I think California has some legislation right now that they're potentially going to block out-of-state ABSs from practicing there if that moves forward. But I agree with you 100% on your premise, which is, the differentiation is going to be where the strategic advantage comes in, right? You want an asymmetric advantage, and you're not going to get that if you're just buying the same license that everybody else has. Like, if everybody has Harvey, there's not a whole lot of differentiation there, right? But if you're doing both, if you're buying licenses for things that you can use and your clients want, and you're building on top of your own data set and your own unique advantages, right? I think every firm has some unique advantages in terms of practice areas, geographic locations, their market fit, the clients they're going after. There's some unique characteristics to probably every firm that's in the AmLaw 200, but how they utilize this technology and where they choose to build and where they choose to buy is going to make a big difference on how effective they are downrange. And I think, you're right. Getting outside capital is going to be extremely helpful, especially as you start to see these IT expenditures go up and up and up, right? Because when the partners start spending 10% of the revenue on IT, it's going to make it a very uncomfortable conversation come bonus time, right? But if you can do it with outside capital and you can mitigate your risk and you can potentially, get some multiple of your revenue in terms of valuation, the idea of owning equity in ABS is very different than the idea of owning equity in a partnership, right? So there are very interesting economics and business models to look at. And it's not clear, what the time frame for all this change is going to be, but I think it is clear that there's going to be some massive change in terms of the way that law firms as businesses are run in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and the governance model too. My listeners have probably heard me talk ad nauseum at this point about just the lack of governance in law firms. Like, I spent 10 years in financial services, very highly regulated industry, and I was primarily in risk management roles. So that's kind of second line of defense. In financial services, that we say we have 4 lines of defense. First line of defense is the business unit, right? The commercial bank, the consumer bank. It could be wealth management. They have controls to mitigate risk in that line of business. Then you have a risk management partner that's aligned specifically to with each line of business. That's your second line of defense. Then you have third line of defense, which is corporate audit. And then you have your fourth line of defense, which is the Wall Street Journal, which is where you end up if the first three fail. And law firms have one line of defense, right? I've yet to see a law firm with an internal audit and risk management partners and an audit committee and, a board of directors that holds everybody accountable. It's just a different model. So I think for firms to scale beyond single digit billions, I think a different business model or corporate structure governance model is going to be needed. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. And I think you can see, there have been a lot of examples of law firms spinning out subsidiary ALSPs, right? Alternative legal service provider units that have done specific things, maybe point solutions in particular areas. And I do think that makes a lot of sense going forward as well. I think you're right that, the traditional law firm is not really well structured at the moment to take advantage of all the opportunities that are out there. But I think with the right focus and discipline around, how do we explore these business models? What are some opportunities we can, seize out here? And how can we look at this more from a private equity or venture capital perspective? It really comes down to just being a little more objective about what the clients want, right? And they need specific legal services. Do they really care how long it took you to deliver those services? Probably not, right? There's a certain value you're delivering. How you do that is really the question we're trying to answer here. Like, should we continue to do it the same way we've been doing it for the last 50 years? Probably not, right? In most cases, we should probably look at, are there some tools that might make us a little more efficient or just make the product better, right? And so that's really where we're coming down. But I think you're right. Like, the business model of a law firm just has not included a lot of governance per se, except I will say that lawyers are generally very, very conservative. And so, they don't take a lot of risk. So for the most part, that's been good to allow us to survive and not go extinct as a business model. We've been able to preserve our own businesses for the most part. And I think it is, it's a good attribute, but it's also probably something that's keeping a lot of law firms from innovating the way they probably should be at the moment.
100%. Yeah, they're lawyers are risk avoidant, and that's good when you're lacking layers of protection between you and the Wall Street Journal. But I think in order to scale, to have Fortune 500 level scale, I'm not sure that the current law firm partnership model is the right path. What about
Agreed.
we're almost out of time, but I did want to bounce one thing off of you, and that is like, how should they think about balancing the protection of the firm's reputation, which, as we just talked about, that's like number one on the differentiation list is the brand, right? Versus the need to make bold moves in technology adoption, because it does come with risk. So I don't know. How do you think about it? What do you think are best practices around that thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think to protect your clients, first of all, you have to develop a good due diligence capability so that you can filter out the noise from the signal in terms of what the vendors are offering you, right? Make sure your client's data is safe. That's fundamentally a requirement, ethical requirement. So making sure you have those pieces, built in place first, so you can screen out bad actors and you can really just work with the best of the best in terms of legal tech providers. And then trying to find legal tech providers that will actually work with you and listen to you. What you don't want to do is just get a salesperson. You want somebody who's actually going to take your feedback and maybe go back to the engineering team and say, hey, they need X, Y, and Z. Can we do this? And then, yes, they can. And so, like I said, the relationships we have right now, we've been talking to these vendors for 2 years, and they've been great to work with. And I think that's what you need. You need a vendor that is going to listen to you and that is going to be reactive to your needs and your clients' needs. So due diligence, reactive, good vendor that you can work with, somebody you can trust, and then, find some use cases where you can actually get some return on investment, or at least you see the light at the end of the tunnel where you can get some return on this investment. Because without that, you're going to have a difficult time selling it to your partners that hey, we need to go back and get some more money to pay for this legal tech, especially if it's not going to make any money anytime soon. So having a clear discipline process on how you're going to get to a return on investment is super important. So I think that's probably the final piece, just making sure you have the right use case and the right clients and the right practice area. They're going to actually try to, do some proof of concept and take some measurements in terms of how much time you actually spent versus how much time you would have spent without the tools. And look, in that process, you're going to end up spending more time, right? Because you need to do it the traditional way and you need to test it in the new way. So it is actually going to be more time committed. But if you're clear on the goal that, hey, at the end of the day, if we can get this right, we can actually, deliver this service to our client and it's less expensive, it's faster, it's better product, then it's worthwhile going through that process. So I guess those would be the 3 steps I would prescribe.
Yeah, and what tech initiative doesn't require more investment in time than the status quo? I'd argue all of them do, right? If you get a new CRM, right, with new capabilities, you're going to have to invest time in, finding a migration path to customize the new system. It's a time investment no matter what sort of tech change you're implementing. And man, your point is really solid about finding the vendors who listen, because that's where we compete with the big boys. Like on the legal intranet side, they're not much competition anymore, but it was Handshake that was bought by Adderant, very big company, not really a strategic platform in their broader portfolio. And then on the extranet side, we compete with IQ, that's owned by Thomson Reuters, which, they are another really big organization. And we are differentiating ourselves. The market has really expressed strong interest for alternatives. And we're raising our hand and saying, hey, we're here and we have a client advisory panel and we'd love you to participate and help us guide the roadmap. And man, that has been such a successful partnership. We have had, especially on the extranet side, which is newer, our intranet platform is very well established. Like quarter of the AM law use us. We're only 3.5 years old. So we've had tremendous traction in that space. But on the extranet side, it took another 2.5 years of R&D to get that right, because it's so much more high risk. It's client facing. Like you have to make sure that governance and security controls, provisioning, all these things are really tightly managed. And our customers feel the difference. And I would echo your sentiments about find a vendor who wants to listen to what you have to say, because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they're like a legal partner in some ways, right? I know we're not supposed to say that on ethical rules, but the reality is that if you're reliant on them for legal services or for services that are going to be a part and parcel of your legal services, you need to be very comfortable that they are actually paying attention to what you need, and that there's a good working relationship there, just like you would want to have with any professional services provider that you're working with, right? You want to make sure that there's a good relationship there, you're communicating well, just important pieces of any good relationship. So yeah, I think that's been hugely important. I think it helps you be much more successful, or mitigate your risks, at least, if you have a good partner who you can communicate with and who's listening to you as you're communicating with them. So yeah, super important.
Totally. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us today. How do people find out more about Fennemore Labs or you? Or do you have a LinkedIn profile? What's the best way for people to get in touch?
Yeah, certainly. LinkedIn, fenimorelaw.com is our website. You can go on there and find out more about Fenimore Labs and what we're doing with AI. Project Blue Wave is our AI project. A lot of good information on the website. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody if you have any questions, or if you want to just discuss legal tech. I'm interested. So feel free to drop me a line on LinkedIn or by email through the website. Appreciate the time. And thank you, Ted, for this opportunity.
Awesome. All right. And then we'll see you not too long in Austin for TLTF, correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. See you at the TLTF Summit. Should be good.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks, David.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.